Welcome into this week's episode of Your Drone Questions Answered, brought by Drone Launch Academy. I'm your host, Chris Breedlove. Today's topic is this: how is crew resource management, otherwise known as CRM, how is this applied on a daily basis within an AEC firm? Welcome my colleague at WithersRavenel, Aaron Varnau. Aaron, thanks for joining the show, man.
Hey, good to see you, Chris.
So, Aaron, before we get into tackling this topic, I'm excited about CRM, crew resource management. If you would, please start listening about your background and kind of how you got into drones and your sort of trajectory, pun intended, within aviation and in the unmanned space.
Sure. So I'm from Indiana. I went to Purdue University and I majored in unmanned aerial systems, which at the time was a very new program. And because we didn't actually have very many drone specific classes yet, I had to take a lot of electives and other aviation topics, airport management, plane mechanics, how to fly a plane, managing airspace, things like that. And crew resource management is in every single one of those classes. So I learned about it from multiple different angles. And that is something that I have tailored into my career at WithersRavenel, starting as a remote sensing technician and now as the remote sensing field coordinator, where managing a crew is one of the most important parts of my job.
Awesome. Let's start at the very beginning then, like CRM, crew resource management. This is not a concept or a topic that's unique to unmanned systems, right? This is just like an aviation kind of core mindset. Is that correct?
Yeah. So crew resource management from that zoomed out perspective, you're going to have to fact check me on this, but historically I have heard that it started because there was an aircraft, a light bulb had gone out. It wasn't a very important light bulb, but the pilot, the co-pilot, and the flight engineer, all three wanted to be the guy that changed the light bulb. And because no one was at the controls, the plane took some damage, and they started CRM as a way to look at hardware and software systems and people and combine them to get the most efficient results and to prevent mistakes, ideally before they happen at all. Because people tend to make mistakes here and there, hardware breaks, and you have to be able to account for personalities in a working environment.
That makes sense. I suppose even from a drone example, it could be something as simple as even as a sole operator, I might need to keep the CRM concept in mind so I don't get so fixated on maybe the solar panel that I'm inspecting or whatever my task is
Right.
and neglect what the drone, the aircraft itself is actually doing, or maybe it's catching some wind gust. Like, and I'm so zeroed in on one thing, my light bulb, right? But in this case, it's the thermal readout on that solar panel, and I neglect something obvious or also important. Is that a fair way to
Yeah, totally.
think about it?
And it's pretty common for our team to send someone out with, say, a Wingtra. We consider a Wingtra a one-person drone sometimes. We have some larger LiDAR systems that are two-man, but on a Wingtra, the FAA has, their vocab words, like machismo is one of them, a sense of urgency is another, these hazardous attitudes. And even if I'm out there all by myself, out in the wilderness or an urban environment, I have to recognize, am I thinking that I'm the man a little bit too much here? Am I trying to work too fast? Taking your time, having a checklist or a standard operating procedure document, something to kind of check yourself on that's documented ahead of time or planned ahead of time can certainly help you prevent a mistake before it happens.
And to your point, Wingfoot or similar platforms that are just so reliable, they can almost, in a positive sense for the manufacturer, they can induce that, oh, it just works. It's so robust and reliable. But we got to be careful as the pilot and the operator to not be lulled into complacency just because, well, it just works and it's easy. That's true, but still have these concepts, these checklists, this preparation involved.
Yeah, and part of crew resource management, as what I do at WithersRavenel, there's a high stress crew resource management and a low stress CRM. And a high stress example, we were recently at a small airport, but they host historical aircraft that don't have, say, a radio to talk to other pilots. And I need to have someone physically, a third man at that airport, watching out for those aircraft and radioing back to me on a just, normal handheld one, what they're doing. Where are they? Is someone taking off or landing? But I also do have my aviation radio to talk to other pilots who might have a radio in the aircraft. So I'm holding two radios. I'm talking to the guy who's actually flying our drone. I'm looking at the ground station, looking at my battery levels and all that. So that's, a high stress. We have to have an airtight plan before we take off so that if anything changes, even though the drone's just flying itself in straight lines, we're prepared. But conversely, in a low stress, like say with the Wingtra, where it's so reliable, it's such a robust system, there might be a little bit of complacency where we have to double check each other in the field. If it's flight number 7, back to back to back, it's 100 degrees and you kind of just lapse a little bit in the afternoon. For me, it's about 1 p.m., 1:30. I know I have to double check myself even, not just rely on someone else to do it for me because you just get a little bit tired, a little bit mentally fatigued. And if there's not really anything going on, you might make a mistake just because you're, no pun intended, you're an autopilot out there.
Absolutely. And you kind of gave a few there, but I guess any other kind of just standout examples of how resource management, maybe some additional examples, either save the day or helped avoid a serious situation, or maybe where CRM was not applied as effectively as it could have been, and maybe there was a near miss.
Sure. I have had 2 instances where a manned aircraft was flying within our, 0 to 400 feet AGL limit, straight through the job site, and both times we were operating as we should. We had one person whose eyes on the drone, they're holding a controller, that's their job. The other guy is manning the ground station, but also will use apps to track manned aircraft that have their ADS-B transceivers turned on so we can see where they are, where they're going, what their speed is, what their altitude is. And they're just listening. They're just paying attention to the environment. And both times before the aircraft came through, that visual observer on the ground station said, "Hey, I can hear something. Something's coming." And the pilot was able to pull the drone out of autonomous flight, lower it down to the ground. And one of those, to this day, I am certain would have been an actual M600 Cessna collision head on. Pilot came over the ridge of a mountain, and we were flying that side of the mountain right up to the top, and near miss, but crew resource management, we had a plan, we knew what we were doing, and my nerves were a little shot. I let him fly for the rest of the day, but it saved the day.
That's awesome. What do you say to crew resource management and that mindset when it comes to flying in warm weather?
Something that connects people and drones is they get hot, and when they get hot, they start falling apart. With our drones, we've been doing this for forever. Back to our M600 days, now we're flying a free fly Alta X for LiDAR. Both of those situations, we are keeping our batteries air conditioned. You do not want to have your batteries sitting in the back of the truck we have a metal bed cover over it, and it's an oven in there. And if your batteries get too hot, some drones will tell you that the batteries are out of temperature range. We recently had a Wingtra do that. It said, "Will not take off drones," or the batteries are too hot, and other drones won't, and their flight performance is affected by that. So it's important to us, we'll keep the batteries in the cab of the truck with the case open, and that way there's air flowing over the batteries. We'll put them on top of the dashboard with that vent blowing over them, and those little things, they keep the hardware functioning. I've seen a Wingtra battery charger go 20, almost 30 degrees over its, office temperature of about 100 degrees while it's charging batteries. And obviously that, I'm sure, is some kind of a fire hazard. It's important for the hardware on that side, but also with people. I know I've had other crew members tell me to slow down because I'll get into this mindset that I'm hot and I'm tired and I want to get it done. And I'll just say, screw it. Like, let's just bang this out. Let's, quit chit chatting and let's knock this project out and go home. They're like, instead, actually, let's take 2 minutes and do nothing and enter our Zen mode. And the heat gets to you, and the heat definitely gets to me. Taking a second to be in the air conditioning, it helps immensely, especially because we set our own ground control points. We'll do topo shots. We'll go do, ground proofing for LiDAR. And that means that we're out in the field with the GPS hiking. And you don't want to do that for 3 hours and wear yourself out. And now you have to operate all of this expensive equipment really without much supervision besides a guy who's your own age with your own experience level double checking you.
That makes perfect sense. What about logs and just log management? I think this is an important topic that everyone kind of knows. Oh, there's some kind of requirement about logs. And so I think some people are like, oh, maybe I'm a smaller operation. Maybe I'm a one person band, as it were. Do I need to subscribe to one of these paid services? Like, just, yeah, any thoughts you have on different approaches where folks can be meeting the requirement, but maybe also not overdoing it?
Yeah, we use Air Data, and I can't remember what, paid subscription tier we're at. I know we used the free version at the start and just decided our needs required a bigger one. But prior to that, I just had an Excel sheet for our Wingshare flight logs and for LiDAR, and I would manually input every flight, or I guess every project and how many flights and who flew it. But with Air Data, it's a lot simpler. You just, like, say the Wingshare, I take the flight log SD card out of the drone, I plug it into my laptop, and I just drag and drop everything in one go, 20 flights at a time and it does all of them. And that shows me what is the average flight time. Every set of batteries I have, what is their capacity will sort of reduce over time. More a problem with LiPo, which we don't have with Wincher specifically, but you can see the capacity of your batteries. You can see a map of everywhere that you've flown your drone. Pretty important for us on that note is you can download a KML of your flight. That's pretty big because we can, if there's some kind of a data discrepancy, we can look at our flight plan and look, did we actually fly the drone over that spot? Or maybe they say, hey, can you add 100 feet onto this roadway of a survey? We can drag in the KML of that flight and say we actually already did if we overflew it. But having all of those logs is important because it shows you how much use you're getting out of each of your drones. If we kind of realized we had one we weren't using as much as we could, maybe it's time to give that to another office. We have an office down in Wilmington and we have an office up in Asheville that both have trained drone pilots with a Part 107. Maybe it's time to give it over. There's all sorts of little use cases. Just having all of that data in one place comes in handy. And with a lot of these, modern services to track all your flight logs, it is as easy as just dragging and dropping and it maps out everything for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are your thoughts about, I don't know, just some good ideas or best practices around pilot training and just crew recruitment? Because people are, oh, it's a drone, it's really cool. Yeah, it is, but there's always other factors you should be aware of and hopefully
Right.
embrace, right?
To tie my experience into it, because I've been at this job for 4 years now, and it's the only job I've had outside of college. It is where all my knowledge comes from, really. For me, it's important to look at what are your needs before you hire someone. So for us, do we need someone who is a pilot primarily? That's 95% of their knowledge, and we're gonna have to train them to be a surveyor in my line of work. Or do we have someone who's a surveyor, they can operate a total station all on their own, and we wanna we need that more really than we need drone help. We just need help with a flight every now and again. So, figure out what kind of experience do you need, obviously. And after that, you just wanna make sure they're a good person. It is so much easier to do this kind of work where you're out, you're stressed out in the field, it's too cold, it's too hot, it's windy, maybe it's dusty on site, and every time the drone takes off, you're getting blasted by dust and dirt. You wanna make sure that the person you're with, you get along with. My favorite parts of my job are the people that I get to work with and the crew that is part of my crew resource management. It's important to not just hire someone because they have the knowledge or they have the experience. You wanna make sure that that's someone that you can gel with and you can operate without speaking to each other. It's really nice when you have a new crew member and you kinda have that first day where you don't even really need to talk. You just know each other's body language. And body language is it's a recognized part of CRM from the FAA's perspective is that, nonverbal, you're a team, you're a crew, you just know how each other works. So, you gotta know that a person you might be hiring is gonna be able to work with you personality-wise.
What would you say to folks? What would you encourage as far as outlets, pathways, whatever, for someone who might be like, hey, this all makes sense, or maybe my company already does it, but I'm not part of it. I want to get part of it. How do I increase my skills or my confidence?
So first, it's good to have a mentor if you can find one, or if you already have one at your disposal to teach you and kind of figure out, how do you learn best? Or maybe it's just important for you to recognize that on your own anyway. But flight hours are important for any drone in any case. For example, at our company, we have a pretty cheapo plastic drone that before you get to fly the expensive stuff, you have to prove that in manual mode without auto lock in place and all that position mode, that you can fly a drone. You can fly it close to a tree and save yourself, or you can fly in a high wind and land it. And that repetition is important. For me, I try to make sure that I know someone has muscle memory with the system before I hand it over and let them take it out in the field on their own. Not necessarily where I'm going to stand over their shoulder and grill them and put them in a high stress situation, make sure they can answer the questions right. But I think that they have an innate understanding of the drone, of everything that goes along with it, all the parts, the flight planning software. The less they're thinking about it while they're doing it is almost better because that means they have an understanding of it on a deeper level. Doing it over and over again until you reach that point that you, maybe with crew resource management, maybe you make a mistake because you got lax with it, you got complacent because it's gotten so easy. That's maybe the time when you've reached a confidence level with it, just through repetition and ideally having a coach. And for part of our crew NOTAMs, that's my responsibility and the crew knows that. So they know to ask me, do we have a NOTAM for this flight? Like we were at the Plymouth, North Carolina airport last week, flying the approach areas to the runway, like
Hmm.
right where a manned aircraft is going to be. So we have to file a NOTAM ahead of time. I call the airport manager, I meet them in person day of, make sure all that's happened. But that's on me. And so my crew knows to check, they don't have to worry about it. They just check if I did it. And when we're flying the drone, really a really good way to tie all that together, having someone you can gel with on your crew, but also double checking each other. We have little code words. We have single word things we can say. So, for example, we have a Regal Vux 120 LiDAR scanner. And when that sensor has booted up and it's ready to go, you'll have a series of colored lights near an SD card slot. And if I say lights before a flight, that is me asking my crewmate, are the lights on the sensor? Is the sensor ready to go? And all I have to say is lights. Or if they say legs, they're asking me, did I physically tug on the legs of the drone to see if they'll pop out so that they don't fall out in flight? So, those little key phrases you can come up with just to easily check each other without it having to be maybe accusatory. It doesn't feel accusatory if all I say is lights. Are they on?
Yeah, I like that. We're all pulling in the same direction, all shooting for the same outcome. So that makes perfect sense, man. Thank you for jumping on, Aaron. Really enjoyed the conversation. And I guess kind of the last thing I'll always tell all my guests, for how can folks reach out to you?
Sure. If you've looked me up on LinkedIn, I've got a unique enough name that I should pop right up. Find me there. You can message me there. Due to a change in my fiance's career, we're moving states away. I cannot take my job with me. I do love my job. I'm a little bit bummed I have to say goodbye to the team. But if anyone wants the best in the business, I will be available in November once the moving is all settled. So LinkedIn is the best way to reach me.
Awesome. But again, Aaron, thanks so much for jumping on me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
To our listeners, thanks for listening as always. Got any questions you want us to tackle on this show in the future, please visit ydqa.io. Shoot me an email at chris@drawlaunchacademy.com or drop at the Draw Launch Academy community. Until next time, have a great week.